Welcome to the Tackling College Sports Podcast, the definitive resource to help you navigate your way to play college-level sports. Here are your hosts, Chris Legates and Mark Franco, where they want you, the TCS Nation, to be your best.
Welcome to TCS Nation, and thanks for tuning in to the Tackling College Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Franco, and sitting right next to me is my co-host. He has no problem taking the escalator whilst not holding the rails. Chris Legates, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Mark, and very excited about our guest today.
Chris, so today we're stepping outside our usual structure. We have the pleasure of speaking with Bryan Caplan, professor of economics at George Mason University and author of several books, which we'll focus on one today. Good morning, Bryan. Thanks for being with us today.
Glad to be here.
Excellent. Bryan, can you give our listeners a brief history of your background and what compelled you to write The Case Against Education, Why the Education System is a Waste of Time and Money?
Sure. I entered the education system when I was 5 years old in kindergarten, and even then it just seemed strange to me that you had to study so many subjects that you would never likely use in real life. And yet at the same time I saw that almost all these successful adults that I knew had amassed a bunch of degrees. So as I went through school, I found more and more evidence that my initial suspicions were right. On the one hand, most of what I was learning I wouldn't need to know again, but on the other hand, you really needed it in order to succeed in life. Eventually, I wound up going to UC Berkeley, studying economics. I got my PhD in economics from Princeton, became an economics professor. And then I spent 6 years working on a book trying to figure out these questions that have puzzled me since I was 5 years old. And the result of that is my book, The Case Against Education, Why the Education System is a Waste of Time and Money.
So I'm just curious, do you get a lot of pushback about what you've just written? And then, you telling us, obviously, you've graduated from Berkeley and earned a PhD from Princeton.
I mean, occasionally people bring it up and say, aren't you a hypocrite for doing this? And my main answer to that is, look, I'm a whistleblower. If I did not have these degrees, would people take me seriously? No, they just say I'm just some blogger in a basement feeling frustrated that he couldn't succeed in the tough academic game. So, I think really I needed to be a tenured professor to write this book.
So from your standpoint, this basically strengthens your argument.
Right. And again, the key part, my key claim is not that school is not useful career-wise. My claim is just that the material that you learn isn't likely to come up on the job. So again, the real puzzle that I try to answer in the book is, why is there this disconnect between the curriculum and success? Because the curriculum seems irrelevant, but you still seem to need it most of the time for a successful career. And I'd say that my whole career really embodies this. Most of what I studied in school I don't use on the job, don't need it, and it was foreseeable that I would not need it. Nevertheless, since I jumped through all those hoops, I get to have this great job.
Well said. Chris?
Dr. Caplan, do you see anything in the future that shows that maybe higher institutions of learning are changing their curriculums to maybe be more well-rounded or approach things a little differently?
It's true that colleges especially are changing the curriculum all the time, but I don't see that there's too much of a improvement there. I think it's more driven by fads, and so some of the most blatant sources of waste, like foreign language requirements, stuff that Americans almost never use and also almost never actually learn in school. I don't see any sign that stuff's going away. So I think there's a slight move towards more programming, although it's very easy to exaggerate how much of that's really going on. It's mostly a small group of people that are very prominent and contribute a lot to society. Yeah, but other than that, I see a very ossified system.
Our podcast is geared for student athletes and parents to help them navigate the process of college selection. In 2018, what do you think that parents are doing right in bringing up their children? Where do you think they can improve? And also in one of your other publications, you mentioned Serenity Parenting. What is that, and how is it beneficial to today's parent?
Yeah, so what are parents doing right? Well, as long as your kid is doing well in high school, I think parents are advancing their kids' own interests by encouraging them to go to the best college they can get into. With the key proviso that you don't want to pay full price for private school, but the basic gamesmanship that most parents are playing for kids that are good students makes a lot of sense. So the big mistake that parents make is pushing their kids to go to college even if they have done poorly in high school. And I'd say this very likely holds true for student athletes as well. So unless your kid is so great that he's likely to become a professional, then it would be more in your kid's interest if he'd perform poorly in high school to try to find some other path like vocational education. Serenity parenting. Yeah, so that's from my book, Selfish Reasons to Have More Kids.
Yeah.
And the main thing that I say in that book is that parents' ability to affect their kids' adult outcomes is actually greatly overstated. So I think so what I argue is that parents should relax more and quit trying to plan their kids' lives out in great detail. But again, if you are going to give your kid advice, at least make it well-informed advice.
It's a great point. It's an excellent point. Can you tell me where you see higher education going in the next 10 or 15 years? Private schools now can run up to $70,000, $80,000 a year. Are we pricing the middle class out of the ability to attend these institutions? And furthermore, in the bigger picture, do we see perhaps the demise of some of these schools?
Right. All right. So great question. So it's true that the list price charged by top colleges is in the ballpark that you're talking about, as long as you're including room and board.
Right.
However, middle-class families would not pay that. In fact, at top schools, middle-class families would probably pay zero or close to it. Because top schools have an enormous amount of scholarship money. Mm-hmm. This is, it is a mistake that is very commonly made by good students from poor families who think they can't afford to go to Harvard. Actually, Harvard is probably the cheapest thing you can do. It's even cheaper than community college because Harvard will pay for everything if you come from a family of below median income. As long as you get in, you're completely set. Is this going to continue? My best guess is that that list price is going to roughly plateau. That could be wrong, but I do think that it's gotten to such a high price that that schools will actually are going to find that it's just not in their interest to keep charging more or to keep raising it. But again, the main thing that's going to keep going on, which doesn't get much media attention, but which is totally true, is that schools are going to continue to heavily discount from list price. So, most people don't pay list price at private schools, important fact to know. And then, is this going to lead to some schools going out of business? A few, right? But again, they're not the top schools. They're not the ones that people crave. They're more like small liberal arts schools, ones that charge these high tuition just to break even, but are failing to break even. So there's going to be a small number. But again, these schools usually have a small number of students, most of them you've never heard of. And their disappearance isn't going to fundamentally change anything.
If I could just ask a quick follow-up to this.
Mm-hmm.
With respect to tuition, do you see that there's a correlation to the rise in tuition as far as comparative to the discount that the schools are offering?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, of course. Yeah, so as the tuition has gone up, the discounts have gone up a lot too. Yeah, and I'm almost sure that the percentage of the total price that you pay has gone. The typical student pays has gone way down. This is true even at public schools, although it's much less extreme. Again, the main problem here is that the people that actually write about college tuition tend to be very elite, and the people they know are elite, and the elites are almost the only people that are paying full price. So they just get a very distorted view of what's really going on because they see the list price, they pay the list price, and then they don't really think to ask, wait, am I normal? And the answer is they're not normal. Most of the students at top schools are not paying anything close to list price.
And when you look at a parent or a family that's doing their due diligence at schools right now, would be looking at, let's say, a school's endowment something that's very important to see what the financial aid process may incur?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. If I was a parent and we were looking at a school, sometimes is it important to look at the endowment of the school to see perhaps what type of financial aid may be available?
Right. Well, that sounds like it's more trouble than it's worth. I would just apply and see what they offer you. Again, so it depends upon how many applications you're doing. So if you're saying, well, I'm already doing 20, should I do 5 more? Then maybe you might want to look at it. Mm-hmm. Although even there, I think you'd be better off going and looking at their financial aid webpage, mm-hmm. where they'll often actually tell you what their formula is. Like I was just at Princeton, they go and they publish their formula for how much financial aid you get as a function of your family income. It's pretty clear, pretty straightforward. So no need to go and be trying to figure out the deep financial of the school. Just find out what packages they usually offer before you decide to apply.
Mark.
I just read an article where it mentioned, or it was mentioned that you had stated, if you want to take classes or be enrolled at Princeton, just walk into a class and sit down and take the class, and no need to pay. Is that something that you encourage, number one? And number two, what ultimately would be sort of the utopia experience for you as for college? What would you like to see ultimately?
Yeah, so if all that you want to do is learn, then what you just said and what I said is the perfect solution. So just unofficially attend whatever school you think is best, and find whichever professors you think are best, whatever classes you think are best. You don't have to pay a dime if all you want is an education, right? If all you want is the best education in the world. I've been at Princeton. There's no effort to keep students keep students from learning for free. This seems hard to believe. Just realize, very few people actually take advantage of this opportunity. Because again, per my book, The Case Against Education, what people are mostly looking for is the diploma and the grades. They don't really care about the learning very much.
Right.
Let's see. And then your second question was,
ultimately, what would you like to see?
So what would I like to see? So I'd like to see a much lower level of college attendance, where where the students that go there either are looking to learn useful job skills or they're genuinely curious about the world of ideas, right? So I think that would mean a very small number of students. So maybe 10% of American high school graduates would be in either category. People who either are there to learn some useful job skills or they're there because they have a genuine love of academics, right? And for others, I think it would be just better if they would go and start their adult lives at an earlier age, right? And again, if that seems like a pipe dream, that's really the whole point of my book, is to say the main reason why you need college is because so many people have college. If hardly anyone had it, you wouldn't need it in order to impress employers anymore, and then you could get a good job without it.
Interesting. I'm going to take a little bit of a turn here, and
sure.
This is sort of a political bent, and I'm just wondering if I can get your take on the following. So, in an article we read, the author discussed the clashing view about college, and he was referring to the different views that Democrats and Republicans have, and noted a study done by the Econ Journal Watch in 2016. And they examined the Republican to Democrat voter registration of professors in 5 fields. Right. It was economics, journalism, communications, law, and psych.
Right.
At 40.
I know the piece.
Oh, okay.
I recently reread it, actually.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, it was, we always hear this, but to see it written was something. And it was talking about the ratios of Dems to Republicans for all professors was like 12-1, econ 4-1. Law 9-1, psych professors was 17-1, journalism 20-1, and history 34-1. And I just wonder if I can get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So 2 things. First of all, you are what you're saying is right from all the data that I've seen, and I've read quite a few other papers by other people as well. Is that the level of liberal bias on undergraduate college campuses, 4-year college campuses, is just beyond belief, right? It is so extreme that when you see the numbers, you have trouble thinking it could really be that extreme, but it is. However, something else I say in my book is that despite this, people's political views don't actually change all that much in college. And, so is this because professors scrupulously avoid injecting their politics into the classroom? I don't think so. In fact, I just spent way too many years in college to consider that even plausible. No, like every professor that I've ever seen, it's obvious where their political views are, as long as it's a class that deals with social issues. You can tell. But the reason why I say that you see so little actual change in students' political views in college is just the professors aren't very persuasive. They're really boring, and attendance is low, and like I said, and they beat around the bush, and they waste a lot of time on topics where the students just aren't paying attention. And so in the end, this enormous political bias, I think, does a lot less harm than you would think, although in terms of having a vibrant intellectual life on campus, yeah, it's terrible.
How does a high school, a senior in high school, a junior in high school, or the parents, sort through this to try to, if it's even at all possible, navigate their way through to find a college perhaps that doesn't have such bias on it, or is that just not existent?
I don't know, so yeah, there's an organization called FIRE, FIRE, where they go and rate colleges based upon not specifically liberal bias, but just on the college's commitment to free speech. Yeah, so like the view that there's a lot of political correctness on campus. I think that's definitely right, but it varies a lot, and there are some schools where, despite the political correctness of some of the students and faculty, they don't actually have power over policy. And so I would encourage people who are concerned to go to those schools. I think the other thing to realize is even at schools that you think of as being run by social justice warriors, usually that's just a few kids, and most people are apathetic and apolitical and more interested in parties and sports than they are in this stuff. Yeah, so, worth keeping that in mind. You shouldn't think that when you see, like when you look at Facebook and you see that there's some protests at a college, you shouldn't think that's the normal thing happening on American colleges. You shouldn't think it's the normal thing happening at that specific college. It just gets media attention because it's unusual and it's gripping and people will share it on social media. But yeah, so, I'd say that, at almost all schools, you can still get the education that you want. It's, like just by exerting some extra effort. If you're worried about your kid going and getting brainwashed, like the most likely scenario is your kid just finds the professors too boring to get brainwashed. If you think your kid is highly susceptible to this, then you might want to go and try to find a university that is different. Sure. But of course, also the major matters as well. So economics, though it still has a heavy preponderance of liberals, is just not nearly. It's much more balanced than in any other social science. Except maybe business. No, actually, business is the same. Maybe, yeah. So I think actually, there's one other that's similar to economics anyway. But do economics. Bottom line, it's a great major.
Right. Do you subscribe to the notion that a lot of higher education institutions just are continuing to coddle kids and not allowing them to be adults?
Sure. Yeah. So this was. Of course, this was true throughout most American history. It's really only in the 60s that the idea that schools should operate in loco parentis went away. Mm-hmm. And yeah, now a lot of it's coming back under different vocabulary. But of course, if you're a parent, maybe you want this, right? If you're a parent, you may say that my child, he's an adult. He doesn't act like an adult. I don't think he's an adult. The law may say it, but not to me, he isn't. Yeah. So yeah, I can totally see why parents might want to send their schools to that, and that's probably a big part of the reason why colleges are doing it. So like when colleges say professors can't have sex with students, seems to me that at least a lot of that is driven by schools saying, do parents want to pay all this money to have our professors have sex with their kids?
Yeah, probably.
Probably not. So in a way, it's kind of amazing that there weren't rules against it before. Right? The idea in the 70s this would be normal, and from what I heard, it really was. I've heard stories from older professors in the 70s. English professors would sleep not just with students in general; they'd sleep with the students in their class and act like there was nothing wrong with it. Wow. So in a way, it just shows how docile parents are that they that for decades they accepted this kind of stuff going on. To me, one of the biggest puzzles about college is just how accepting people are and how deferential they are. I see this for lower grades as well. I think there's just something about the mystique of the teacher, of the educator, where parents who otherwise would be very skeptical and try to demand value for their money say, "Oh, it's a teacher, it's a professor. We must respect the artist."
Chris?
This is a great piggyback. Dr. Caplan, what would you advise, or do you think the role of the parent should be in the college selection process for their son or daughter?
Right. Yeah, that is a good question. So I've got 4 kids, so minimum just to give advice. Hopefully you've spent your child's youth building up a great reputation for honesty and candor. Most parents don't, and that's probably why their kids don't listen to them. So in my house, I am known for my scrupulous honesty, and so when I give advice, kids listen because I don't sugarcoat things. Right. right? And I would say that, like, if you're a parent and you're still some years away from college, stop sugarcoating stuff. Become a totally trustworthy person. Don't think that by lying to your kids you can get away with it for very long. You can't. To me, it's one of the dumbest things parents do is lying to their kids in ways where the kids can check whether or not you lied. And let me find
100% agree with you.
They don't listen anymore. So have a reputation for honesty and candor, and then use that to tell your kids what you think. And then I would also say, like, if you're paying for your kids' college, then you should be actively involved in making sure that your family is getting good value for the money. Right. And, I know there's a lot of people think that, every kid is entitled to have their parents pay for them to study any major they want at any school they want. To me, that's just crazy. Look, it's your money. Like you've already given the kid the gift of life and 18 years worth of support. And why should they go and have you pay for them to study anything they want, regardless of the likely outcome? If you are fine with paying for your kid to go and get a degree in fine arts, even though they have no apparent artistic talent and will never get a job with it. Go ahead with that. But I'd say there's no reason for parents to be embarrassed about saying, look, I'm not paying for that. And in fact, I think that's probably going to be good for your kids if you at least say, look, I don't consider this good value. Well, these are the things I will pay for. These are the things I won't pay for.
It comes back to economics. What's the ROI on it?
Yeah, right. And that's something where, as a parent, you want to go and, look at your kid too. Like, how good was my kid in high school? Like that has a big effect on the return on investment, because one of the best predictors of how well you'll do in college is how well you did in high school.
Sure. And I could attest to that. I'm 26 years now as a soccer coach in higher education, as well as I've been a professor. I've worked with admissions. So I could tell you that now more and more kids are on their own for footing the bill of college than I've ever seen before.
Right. So for them, again, like, the parents can still say, look, it's your money. I can't tell you what to do. But, like, you do realize how unlikely it is that this is going to work out. Right. All right.
Here's what you're putting in, and here's what you could expect to get out.
Yeah. Right. And again, like as a parent, rather than say, I'm a parent, I know better, I say so, I would tell kids, well, look at other kids that tried doing what you are trying to do, and see how often it works out for them. Right. So, obviously for athletes, if they think they're going to be a pro, to say, well, look at other kids that were not the best athlete in their high school, and then see how many of them became professional athletes.
Right. And that percentage will be 0.
Yeah.
Right.
Look at how many kids who were the best in their high school who still didn't become. That's a lot too.
Absolutely. Well, we're enjoying this so far, Dr. Caplan. We're going to switch channels just a little bit on you. You've answered some difficult questions, but now it's going to get really difficult for you. The heat's going to get turned up. This is the getting to know you portion. Now we're going to fire through some questions and find out a lot about you. Mark's queued up the music. Here we go.
Bear with us with this, please.
All right. Sounds good.
Getting to know getting to know all about
I'm sure this hasn't happened in any other interview that you've done.
No, but it's one of my favorite songs.
Oh, great. Perfect.
getting to
All right. Let's cue the
It's
first.
a song about a teacher, as you
That's
mentioned.
right. That's right.
Yes, it is.
The first question we have for you is, if we were to search your phone, what would be the top 3 played songs or artists?
Yes, so Richard Wagner, great German composer.
Sure.
I just listen to his stuff almost all the time. Punk rock band Bad Religion.
Yeah.
Right, for something different. And then, let's see, there's a whole series called Lebendige Vergangenheit, which is living memories. So these are basically great opera singers of the past, put out by a label that just does a great job of finding amazing singers. That, again, normally I'm one of the people who thinks that the world's getting better all the time, but for opera singers, to me, it's the people of the past that are the best. It just seems very hard to equal them, and I don't see it happening much today.
Oh, that's great. Who's the most famous person in your contact list?
Most famous person in my contact list, Steven Pinker.
Wow.
Excellent. And do you have a favorite quote or quotes?
Favorite quote? Let's see. I've got a few. A person that I despise, and yet I quote him a lot, Vladimir Lenin. He had a line where he said, "The worse, the better." And sometimes when people are in a very difficult situation, I will quote this to them to give them some hope. There's also a line that I like, which was usually attributed to Buddha, though he didn't say it, which is, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I like both of those.
That is a great one.
Yeah, I like that one.
Let's see.
Oh yeah, and then also I quote the movie The Room all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So get out of my life. Not you guys.
Yeah. You say that at home or at school, or both?
All the time. And then there's a movie from the movie about the making of The Room, The Disaster Artist, where he says, he's a positive person. So so I'll often describe he's a cool guy, positive person.
Positive person.
Disaster Artist is good. Yeah.
Number 5. I'm sorry, number 4.
Yeah.
I'm skipping ahead here. Can you give the listeners a little known fact about yourself?
Little known fact about myself. Yes, I created an entire medieval fantasy world in junior high and high school called Endalagon, and I wrote a complete encyclopedia for it.
Wow.
Wow.
This was before the internet. I was really bored.
Yeah, I said you had a lot of time on your hands.
Hundreds of pages of history of a fictional world. And this was how I spent my time, grades like 7 through 11 or so.
Wow. I was just going to ask you how
long
you dedicated.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Number 5. Who is the biggest influence in your life?
Biggest influence in my life. So I think I'm actually going to say philosopher Michael Huemer. Mm-hmm. I was friends with him as an undergraduate, but he grew up to become a famous philosopher, and I maintain that he's actually the best philosopher ever. I've spent a lot of time reading philosophy, and to say that like most philosophers, if someone said recommend a book, I'd be embarrassed to recommend it. His books I will swear by and say, look, this is a great book. It's one where when you start reading it, if you just put in some mental effort, you will see that he's not just trying to make stuff up. He's not just trying to snow you with jargon. He starts with premises that you probably already believe and leads you to conclusions that will blow your mind. So Michael Huemer, again, I think of his best book is called The Problem of Political Authority. But really, almost everything that he's written is golden. Even when he writes on topics that I don't care about. He has a book on infinity, and I couldn't care less about infinity, but I read the whole book because he makes the subject good.
Oh, I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah, definitely.
Question number 6. If you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would you choose?
Let's see. Yes, I know you asked me this before, but this one is harder. Let's see. Let's see. Probably, yeah. So, this may seem like a cop out, but I'm going to say Jesus. Mm-hmm. There's just so many unanswered questions about him that I would like to ask. Starting with, did he really exist at all? I guess he's at the dinner. Then we got confirmation on that. And then secondly, what did he really say? And who are all these people? And why is it that St. Paul doesn't seem to know anything about your life? How do you explain that? Yeah. And also, were you surprised by what happened? The subsequent 2,000 years. So
the multi-course dinner. That's for sure.
I think this would be awesome, regardless of what he said. This is one where there's some famous people where you might be very disappointed. I don't think you could be disappointed by having a dinner with Jesus, even if he seemed like completely inarticulate. You'd wow, all right, so this guy is totally inarticulate, but somehow he did all this stuff. Amazing.
Well, just him being there would be just the start of being.
Question number 7: If you weren't in academia, what do you think you would be doing?
Yeah, so the easy answer is I'd be working at a think tank, something like that. That's probably too close. Mm-hmm. I actually, when I was young, a totally different thing that appealed to me was computer programming. Mm-hmm. And it is as hard to imagine anything more different from being a research professor, because research professor spends years without getting any feedback, and then even when you get published, the feedback is quite ambiguous. Whereas a programmer, you're constantly getting a definite answer, yes or no, about whether the program works or not.
Right.
Yeah, but I enjoyed that in a very different way than I enjoyed academia. At the same time, I think I'd be pretty mediocre at that, just because there's so much talent in that field, where I just don't think that I have the brains to compete with that. Whereas in academia, there too, I mean, like I often feel like I'm underpowered IQ-wise compared to the top people. But I think I can make up for it with just sheer iconoclasm and just being willing to ask questions that other people don't touch. And that to me is my edge. I mean, I consider myself below average in intelligence for my PhD class at Princeton, but I will give myself top marks for being willing to talk about questions that nobody else wants to talk about. And I think that's why I've succeeded as I have.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Question number 8. What is the one thing you believe that others might think is crazy?
So probably radical free will despite whatever you see in a physics or chemistry textbook, I just say that like physics and chemistry textbooks don't even predict that people will have any conscious experiences. So the fact that they also say that our actions are entirely determined or except at the quantum level, which isn't really the same as free will, I'll say that does not sway me and is not nearly enough to overcome my constant observation that I do have free will. Right? So I mean, I know there's a bunch of people who think this and say, no, free will is just an illusion. And I say, well, why not just say the whole physical world's an illusion if you're going to dismiss everything that I experience?
Right.
So there's a lot of smart people who think this is crazy, but to me, I would just say, look, if the basis of science is observation, then I'm not going to throw out all my observation because you have a theory that says my observation can't be true.
Well done. Yeah. What is your morning ritual?
Yep. So normally, I wake up to the alarm clock. I generally am a poor sleeper. And, at my age, I just have a lot of aches and pains, so I have trouble sleeping more than 6.5 hours without my body hurting too much to keep doing it. Fortunately, usually that's enough for me. But anyway, so normally then I drag myself out of bed, and then I like to immediately start working because it's annoying to me to feel tired and yet not be doing anything. Because then it's like, why did I wake up at all if I'm not doing something immediately? Right. So then normally I so I homeschool my 2 older sons, so I just round them up and we drive to the office, and then I catch up on my email, Facebook, Twitter, blog, and then. Usually after about 30 to 45 minutes of that, I start whatever work is actually supposed to be.
Excellent. And lastly, what book are you currently reading or have just read?
Let's see. I just finished rereading the Fables graphic novel series, volumes 1 through 12. So I'm a big consumer of graphic novels. This was one of the biggest ones of the knots, the first decade of the 21st century. Yep. And since I'm going to be publishing my first graphic novel next year, I was curious just to go and reread these 12 volumes, which made a big impression on me at the time. But now that I actually do write comics for a living, I was more interested in the production side of it and just seeing like how do they structure it and how many panels did they do per page, what shapes of panels were they doing, how are they doing the transitions, the borders and other details like that. So in the business there's something called the full bleed, where you actually have a picture that goes out to the edge of the page, which you will often do to give an indication of space. So I'm looking for details like that. But also, it's just great storytelling.
Wow. You handled the getting to know you section with the greatest of ease, Dr. Caplan. We're going to
thanks a lot.
We're going to give you the knocked it out of the park right here. The crowd roars of approval. Many guests have folded under that line of questioning before, but the greatest of ease, you handled it. Outstanding.
Well done.
If you don't mind all your listeners thinking I'm crazy, that's fine by me.
No, we're really enjoying this. This comes to my final question as we get back on topic. In your opinion, what can you tell us about the values or the worth of trade schools now for the high school graduate?
Right. I don't know about trade schools specifically. I read all the research that I could find on vocational education in general, of which trade schools would be a part.
Right.
And the general punchline of this research is that vocational education is undervalued, just selfishly speaking. Right. So even if you don't wind up doing that trade, researchers still find long run modest, but still, not to be sneezed at benefits for income and employment. So the chance that you'll have a job as well as the amount of money they'll be making. And then for the people that actually do wind up pursuing that career, then it's a really good deal, right? And the other thing is that for students who do not like school, which is actually a ton of students, right, vocational education also is something that not only keeps them from dropping out, keeps them from turning to crime. So you've got that big advantage too, right? So probably actually vocational education has an effect similar to sports, where it keeps students who otherwise would hate being there in there and showing up at least. Mm-hmm. And then I also go on to say that from the point of view of taxpayers, vocational education is especially good because it's not just a matter of jumping through hoops in order to impress employers. You're actually acquiring useful skills, which then benefits society.
That's excellent. Mark?
I've got my last question. Ryan, so you mentioned you do have 4 children, mm-hmm, and I'm just curious, do you think the advice that you will bestow upon them regarding higher education will align with the current thinking? Or I'm just curious of the thought process there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I even have a page on this in the book. What would I, this guy, he wouldn't tell this to his own children. And I say, well, yeah, I give my kids the same advice that I would give to anyone, which is to take a look at how well your performance has been so far to predict what your performance is going to be like. Right. So if my kids are good students, then I'll say, college is a really good idea, and let's go and work out what's likely to be a good major for you, what's likely to be a good school, who's going to be paying for what. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if I have a kid that is getting C's in high school, then I'm just going to be honest and say, look, like the very low chance this is going to work out. Why don't we find something else that you like and are good at besides academics?
I'm also just curious, additionally. So you're obviously, you call yourself sort of a whistleblower and you go against the grain, yet you teach at George Mason University. What is it like? Do you get any flack there from other professors and from the
administration?
The administration.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. No. So like me, I'm in the economics department, so almost everybody I talk to is another economist.
Yep.
There's several that just say I'm wrong, but it's all brotherly. It's all it's beyond collegial, right? I work with my best friends, and so some of them agreed with me initially, and then there's some that I've actually changed their minds. And if you know how hard it is for one professor to change another professor's mind, it's highly gratifying.
Monumental.
Yep.
It is a gratifying achievement. It's the work of years.
Yeah.
To an outsider, it might say, well, who cares what that guy thinks? I care, because he's my brother and he's a genius. And if I can change his mind, then I deserve to change everyone's mind, even if hardly anyone's minds are actually changed. Right?
That's like changing someone's political affiliation.
So that's what's in my heart. The administration, has been completely cool. The president of the university went and tweeted my work, and he asked me out to lunch, and he says he disagrees. Although when I talked to him and said, so what is the stuff, he said, well, you said I'm wrong, so what is it that I said that you do agree with? And he said, yeah, well, I agree with you about this whole signaling thing. And I said, yeah, well, that's almost the entire book, so now I'm really confused.
You're okay with it?
Yes, but there's been no effort to get on my case. No one's made any threats of any kind. I've had a few people say, could we talk to you, so we're interested in improving the program. And so, I don't think they're too likely to listen to me, but still, I think it's very collegial of them to come and chat with me. So, yeah, what I found is, most professors who deal with the media or with any broader audience seem very bitter and complaining about how poorly they're treated, and that's not my experience at all. Virtually everyone is cool to me, and I've got no complaints.
That's great to hear.
Awesome.
So how can listeners get in touch with you?
Right. So I blog for EconLog. So that's just one word, EconLog. I have a website, bcaplan.com. So that's BCAPLAN. And then, of course, you can buy my books on Amazon, including The Case Against Education, for just $20.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, it's great.
So we'll make sure all of that goes up in the show notes. So anybody listening will be able to click those links and follow through.
Excuse me.
No problem. So lastly, is there anything outside of the book that you wish to promote or discuss that we haven't covered?
Sure. Well, I've got a graphic novel coming in next year. I'm happy to talk about that if you want to.
Sure. Go ahead. Take a few moments.
So as I mentioned, I've long been a big fan of graphic novels. So what is a graphic novel? It's a comic book with high literary and intellectual standards. And so, 2 years ago, I started working in earnest on an idea that I had for a while. I wanted to do a graphic novel on the social science and ethics of immigration. And now the book's going to get published next year. So it's called All Roads Lead to Open Borders: The Science and Ethics of Immigration. Now I actually cannot draw. I do the pre-visualization for the book, but I managed to get my #1 artist choice in the world to be my artist.
That's outstanding.
He's drawn 90% of the drafts already. So this is Zach Wienersmith, who writes and draws the webcomic Saturday Morning Breakfast cereal. If you've ever shared or seen a shared cartoon on Facebook, about a 1 in 3 chance that he drew it.
Wow,
and,
that's impressive. Jeez.
Yep, and so this has been the best collaboration of my career. So for me as a fanboy to get to become a player in the industry at whatever level and to get to collaborate with an artist at his level, at the top of his game, is a total dream come true. So I'm thrilled.
You can hear the enthusiasm in your voice about it.
No question.
Yes, Zach Wienersmith is wonderful.
Well, once again, we want to thank you. We've been speaking with Bryan Caplan, professor of economics at George Mason University and author, and will be a duly minted author come next year.
Yeah, soon.
Thanks a lot.
Soon enough. So don't go anywhere yet. TCS Nation, get in touch with us at tacklingcollegesports.com. Make sure you sign up with your first name and email to be included in the Friday 5, which is a weekly email of 5 sports-related items that we think would be of interest to you. You can email us at tacklingcollegesports@gmail.com. Facebook is /Tackling College Sports. Twitter and Instagram, all the same, Tackling College. And until next time, be your best.
Be your best.